Hey, welcome back to John's Briefs. Mark, thank you as always, man. I appreciate you helping us out and coming along and giving us really free legal advice, man. I appreciate it.
Happy to do it.
And today, an interesting one. We've seen a couple videos on the channel recently of employees, whether they are assaulted or somebody points a gun at them, wants money out of the till, or in that one case, and we'll put links in the description to a strong arm robbery. He didn't have a weapon, but he comes in and he's grabbing all those things. In particular, I want to talk about the one out of Clackamas County in Oregon. And this guy gets fired for drawing a gun and defending himself. So let's talk about these employer relationships and what those mean. Today's video is brought to us by the generosity of Firearms Legal Protection. Firearms Legal Protection is a legal defense program for lawful gun owners. You win the fight, and they will help you win the fight after the fight for the rest of your life. There's a link in the description for a coupon code for a discount for all active self-protection watchers. So if you've watched the video, guy comes in, robs him with a machete, or not a machete, a hatchet.
Tries to
rob him, goofball. Threatens him with deadly force with this hatchet. Clerk pulls a gun on him, like, nope, not happening. So dude drops him, the hatchet, runs off eventually, and that guy got fired for that. And I guess, I don't know, Mark, I'd love your thoughts on this. As a libertarian, I go, hey, it's a private relationship. They can set anything they want. I don't think it's necessarily a wise thing. But are there any legal implications here?
Well, when you talk about legal implications, the law's big, right? And
right.
the law covers different categories. And we normally talk about criminal law, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's the area that I practice in, and normally that's the analysis we get into. But now you're asking a completely different question. In the civil world, you're asking about employment law. And, different states have different rules here. But generally speaking, this is a function of the employer-employee relationship. And, especially as a libertarian, right, we as libertarians will say, hey, if you're competent adults, you ought to be able to contract for whatever type of relationship you want. And, the typical employer-employee relationship isn't what we call an at-will relationship, right, which means you can quit anytime, we can fire you at any time. And generally the law says that's fine.
Right.
The only restrictions on that are for some sort of prohibited reasons. You can't fire somebody for some of the small prohibited reasons, which are not at issue in this situation. So you and I might say, in fact, I would say, an employee like that who wants to take the risk of pulling out a firearm and protecting the employer's property and maybe his own life, by standing there and defending sort of the ground and repelling what would otherwise be an armed robbery, that's the kind of employee I want.
Yeah, right. Give him a raise.
I'll take as many of those people as I can take. Now, on the other hand, there are some employers who are just liability freaked out, right?
Yeah.
And their position is going to be probably for liability reasons. Look, whatever they want to steal, and this is the policy at most banks and a lot of restaurants. If somebody comes in, they're trying to rob the place, just get out of the way and move on. And so there can be many reasons for that policy, right? I mean, one reason, not insignificant, is if the employee uses force inappropriately,
right,
now you got liability on the business. Another reason is, what if something happens to the employee and part of their job duties is to defend, and now they don't have the proper training or things like that. So I think a lot of employers probably say, look, I'd rather just deal with the loss of property. It's insured anyways, likely. Don't resist. And so in this case, you got an employee, maybe, and we're speculating a little bit here, who's breaking the rules of the employer-employee relationship. So even though that person did what we would call the honorable thing and something that's perfectly legal under the law, right? Because you got an imminent threat of deadly physical force. As we know, your listeners know that you can at least threaten deadly physical force in that case. And so he didn't do anything wrong under what we call the criminal world.
Right.
But he sounds like he violated something in the civil employment law arena. And even if he didn't, right, the employer can just say, hey, we don't want that guy here because of whatever reason, because he didn't follow the rules, or maybe it wasn't a rule, but we just think he's too maybe quick to pull out a gun, or who knows what. Whatever their reasons are, they can just say we're terminating the relationship, and that's it. So we don't agree with the decision, but that's the nature of a free society, right?
So, and we're still talking generalities here, and I guess I'm thinking, I know plenty of people work in an environment where their employee handbook says, you're prohibited from carrying a firearm. or any other tool or whatever. And, okay, in some places they're going to enforce that with metal detection or whatever. That's pretty serious. In other places, it's just a rule. And that's not necessarily a legal thing, but as an employee, if you ignore that, is there ever a time where that's worse? I mean, I guess if you work for the government or something, but if you're working for a private party, then it's worse than just, well, we'll just fire you if you get caught?
Well, I think probably that's going to be the remedy for violating one of the rules of the employment, right? I mean, certainly if you violate the rules of the employment and some harm results, right? If somebody sees the gun or is injured in an accident or something like that, then of course there can be liability. But, these are just examples of rules that we may not agree with, right? But like I said, in a free society, people are free to make such rules. And I mean, a lot of the gun community, I know this will get some negative comments from the people on your channel, but look, people make negative comments, so it's not a big deal.
Welcome to the internet.
Well, I mean, we're a free society, right? This is about an exchange of ideas, but a lot of the gun guys get upset when private business owners say no guns, like they have some right to take their gun on someone else's property, but people who appreciate freedom recognize the rights of the property owner to make rules, even rules we don't like, we think are maybe foolish or we don't agree with for some reason. The owner of the property gets to make these rules. And as a gun owner, if somebody makes a rule that says no guns, I think we, as a responsible community, ought to respect those rules. Now, nothing says you can't pick it outside. You can't say, hey, I don't go to that business. I encourage my friends not to go to that business. We ban that business. No problem. That's the marketplace.
That's right.
You're free to spend your dollars however you like. And if you don't want to spend your dollars at a place that disarms you when you enter their property, that seems perfectly reasonable to squawk about. But to sort of cover up and hide the gun and say, I'm not respecting that rule and entering anyways, to me violates the property owner's right to control the property and may very well amount to a trespass. So I never recommend people do that.
Yeah, and I think we can look at the employment contract, even if it's an unwritten contract, in the same way, right? Here's the rules of working here. And this is our property, this is our business, we're paying you to do a job, so this is the rules for you doing that job. And if you choose not to do that, now you're violating what we've asked you to do.
Right. I mean, there are probably two groups of people in the sort of the gun crowd, right? There's the more libertarian-minded crowd that says, hey, look, I respect your rights, you respect my rights. If I'm a reasonable, responsible guy, I should be able to have a firearm. You have no right to tell me I can't have it. We get that. Then there's the other group that just wants to sort of impose their ideas about the world, even ideas that maybe we happen to agree with, and try to sort of force a what I call a gun culture on other people. That is not a freedom position.
Nope. You got it. Freedom for me means freedom for thee. I can tell you an instance of this, Mark. I have a dentist that I love. We've used for over a decade here in the Valley, and he just moved to a new building right across the street. So I've been to him for a decade. Everything's great, and I walk into his new building, and there's a no gun sign on the door, and I go, man, that's a pretty serious issue. And so I respected that with that first one. I went and put my firearm back in the car and got my teeth cleaned. Doctor comes in and I say, hey, doc, I got a question for you. This is a pretty serious issue for me. I see your new building. It's beautiful. I love all the stuff you got here. Congratulations. I said, but you've asked me not to be your patient anymore. And he was like, I'm sorry, what? And I said, hey, man, I look at the door and it's got this sign on it. And that to me is an important thing. And I don't think I want to do that. So that's a big deal to me. I'm sorry you've done that. And he was like, oh man, I am so sorry. That is a relic of the last tenant, and let's just go out there right now and take it down. And so we did. We scraped the stupid thing off the door and off we went. I had to make that decision though, whether or not I was going to say, I don't care, whatever, I'll leave it in the car. I don't think it's the right thing to just walk past it, because that's his right as a business owner to set his conditions. But maybe sometimes to talk with them about it. Sometimes you win some hearts and minds, and it worked out.
Yeah, and as you know, just to sort of, for the fun of it, taking a little bit of the other side, there are lots of idiots with guns.
It's true.
Right? And I mean, so it's certainly possible that a responsible gun owner who's very pro-gun might take the position of, look, if you understand guns and you're a responsible gun owner, I'm perfectly happy to have you on my property. Like I would feel, right? I feel safer when there are responsible gun owners on the property, because we're all better off, is the reality of the situation. But if you got idiots with guns, if you got these these morons, the guys who hold the firearms like this, right?
Right.
Those guys, I
Wave guns
prefer a
around.
no gun policy for those people.
Right.
But those probably aren't the type of people that are going to follow your policy in any event.
Any rate, right? Yeah, it's true. So, I mean, as far as this issue in Clackamas and others, I mean, I think it's a policy I disagree with. It's a policy that I think to fire somebody who protected himself from deadly harm is short-sighted, but it's their policy to make. And what my hope would be is that the clerk who was fired finds very quick employment somewhere else. And other people go, hey, you're the kind of employee that we want who will take personal responsibility.
I was thinking the same thing. I think if this story gets a lot of play, and I can tell you if this guy was a qualified guy and he was here in the local community, that's the kind of person I want to talk to about working at my firm, no question about it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think maybe there's something in there for employers if you're looking at that. I'm an employer. I have several, well, I guess they're 1099 folks, so not necessarily independent contractors do what they want. But when I was a managing supervisor for a company, I always said, look, I don't need you to defend the property. Property is just an insurance claim away. We'll let the insurance company deal with property. But if you choose to defend your life or my life, that's great. Just do so really judiciously. I don't want you to, don't take risks. If we can get out of there and they take a bunch of property, whatever, we'll file the insurance claim and it's no problem whatsoever.
Sound like a reasonable employer to me.
Be smart, be smart. Mark, thanks so much. I think that you're right. The gun community sometimes gets up in arms over this. And I think we forget that the employer does have rights as well. And the company itself, even if they're just super liability averse, that's their right. And if they want to do that, we got to let them do it.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, guys.